Oh my God, James Gunn made for the Suicide Squad. I mean, like, perfect match. Let's review the Suicide Squad 2021. Let's go. The Suicide Squad stars Margot Robbie, Joel Kinnaman, Idris Elba, and is directed by James Gunn. What's up, guys? So I just got out of the Suicide Squad, saw it in IMAX. I can't recommend seeing this movie enough in IMAX. It's just made for IMAX, just because of the sound design, the James Gunn of it all. There's blood flying at you from the screen. Just so much great stuff to just really chew on. No king shark pun intended with this movie in IMAX. Like, wow. And guys, let me just say, this movie is sensory overload. But that's pretty much what you get with James Gunn. But I think, personally, this might be James Gunn's best directed movie. It might be the most James Gunn of a James Gunn movie that I've ever seen. And a little backstory on me with James Gunn, okay? I'm not a James Gunn fanatic. I like a lot of his movies. I wasn't the biggest fan of the sequel to Guardians of the Galaxy, although I love the first Guardians of the Galaxy, okay? So I'm not like completely crazy about James Gunn, but this is I guess this is my James Gunn. This is what I love about the possibilities with this director. And you can tell that the studio just backed right away and said, you go ahead and do whatever the hell you want to do, okay? Because you're James Gunn. And you have a fan base. You know, that's the cool thing about a director that has a built-in fan base, and people will flock just by hearing that director's name. There's not too many directors that have that power. James Gunn is one of those directors, and boy, is he going to garner more fans after this movie. And it's an uphill battle because this is Suicide Squad. We remember the debacle with the last Suicide Squad movie and how much hate it received, because you could tell that way too many cooks in the kitchen. The whole movie felt like a music video. Poor David Ayer had to, you know, he's went on Twitter a couple times stating, this is not my movie, okay? That movie you saw, that's not me, okay? I have a completely different movie. That movie is done, by the way, the Ayer cut. He literally said that there's a couple people in his life that have seen that movie. I want it. I want it really bad because I think there's a lot of possibilities with Suicide Squad. You can pick out certain scenes in the movie, characters, everything, and there's a good movie in there somewhere, I think, possibly. So I want the Ayer cut like really bad, especially after watching this movie. And this is not really connected to that movie at all, even though it utilizes actors and characters from that movie, which can be a little bit confusing. But doing my research, no. James Gunn, this is his own vision for the Suicide Squad. Continuity-wise, not really connected to the last one. They don't even mention the last one. Now, this is going to be a spoiler-free review. I could probably spend an hour on this movie because there's just so much to chew on, so much coming at you. So, quick plot synopsis, though. Amanda Waller, played by Viola Davis again, who is the perfect Amanda Waller. Wasn't Amanda Waller in the Green Lantern movie? Did Viola Davis play? I'll have to go back and check, okay? You know, she really has her big thumb over the convicts, the Suicide Squad in this penitentiary. And she sends them on this mission to this island to free these political prisoners at this building called Jotunheim. And so, of course, our anti-heroes, they are going on this mission, and they're being watched closely by Amanda Waller and her crew. A key character here is Bloodsport, played by Idris Elba. I'd say Idris Elba is probably like your lead character in this movie, even though this is an ensemble. But to me, he's kind of the heart of the movie. You know, he's got this relationship with his daughter. Very funny scene at the beginning of the movie. He's basically telling her, I'm not a good father. You should not be coming to see me. And so that's kind of your emotional anchor of the movie because it comes around full circle later in the movie. But he doesn't even want to go on this mission, but she tells him, I will convict your daughter and I will put her in this prison with you if you do not go on this mission. So he ends up having to go on the mission. She always has her thumb on these prisoners. Now, let's not waste your time. Let's talk about what is so great about this movie. It's a few things. The direction by James Gunn, great characters. You know, he spends a lot of time on key characters in this movie. The bombastic, crazy special effects. This movie feels so epic, like larger than life. And in true James Gunn fashion, the last act really just goes for the jugular, and it's just complete insanity. And you might look at I guess the final showdown, the final monster that they fight, as kind of silly, but it all works for some reason. I don't know why. It just really, it works. But first off, the characters in this, we talked about Bloodsport a little bit. Idris Elba, perfect in this role. He's not the same character as Deadshot Will Smith in the previous movie, and I think he's better. And that's not really Will Smith's fault. They just didn't really focus in on the characters as much in that movie. In this one, there's so much great character fat to chew on with all of them. Peacemaker, John Cena, surprised me. I've never been a big John Cena fan, but this character is irresistible. And he's a question mark, but really all of these characters are question marks. These are anti-heroes. These are people that are not to be trusted. So even outside of that, you got some question marks amongst the crew. But it's ironic that his name is Peacemaker, and he's probably the most violent criminal out of all of them. And he says he's fighting for peace, which is hilarious. And I guess kind of relatable. Now, you got a couple of really eccentric characters in here. You got this character named Ratcatcher, played by Daniela Melchior. Really interesting character. Another one of those characters that has a lot of heart to them. Even though she controls rats, and at face value you think, what is that power, like controlling rats? But it does play a big part in this movie. And again, James Gunn focusing on those characters and making you love this character that controls rats, you know? That just goes to show that you could have a superhero with the most minuscule power, but with proper care and attention to that character, they can still be beloved by an audience. Then you got David Malchin, who's definitely made a name for himself. You see him pop up like The Dark Knight, Ant-Man. Always a very eccentric actor, and I think he's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And Polka Dot, man, this character, again, silly as hell. His power, he throws polka dots at people. But he has some really funny moments in this movie. Speaking of comedy, this movie is full of great comedy. It's subjective, but I think most of the comedy lands. I haven't talked about Harley Quinn yet. I'm saving that for here in a minute. I think comedy works when you really build characters, because then you care about those characters. So then what they say just has much more depth to it. And if it's a joke, it makes it even funnier. And that's what happens with this movie. You get those moments, especially between like Peacemaker and Bloodsport. They have these really funny competitive moments with each other. And then you got Polka Dot, who's just so freaking whacked out crazy out of his mind. So just, he could say just the most mundane stuff and it works. It's funny. Didn't even bring up King Shark, played by Stallone. Wow, it works though. Because he's extremely violent, but he's so freaking dumb. And just mixing these elements together, it's a blast. Harley Quinn, I think this might be the best performance of Harley Quinn by Margot Robbie, even though I loved her in her Solo movie. You know, I think that movie's underrated still. I think it's very good, actually. But this is my favorite performance of Harley Quinn. I think she really comes into her own. And I like that James Gunn had these moments in there where you almost feel like, is Harley Quinn getting soft? Is she not as crazy as she should be? And then all of a sudden he pulls the rug out from under you and you're like, oh, that's right. There she is. There's Harley Quinn. Just when you think she might have a heart, she completely flips it on you. You know, she can't have a heart. She's just crazy. And there's a good portion of the movie where she's separated from the rest of the gang. But those are some of my favorite parts of the movie. She shines completely. There's a torture scene in there that's great. There's a hand-to-hand combat scene with her. It's all her, and she's just completely kicking ass. Margot Robbie is Harley Quinn at this point. She's amazing. Now, last thing I gotta say, I think this might be a polarizing type movie, okay? I adored it. I loved it. My wife hated it, like hated it with a purple passion, and I could tell just by looking at her, response to the movie in like the first 15 minutes. This was not for her. And I think there's an audience out there, like my wife, that this is just not gonna be for them. The blood is crazy in this movie. Like, this is James Gunn's vision, and if you don't like it, tough. And I like that even more about movies like this, that are unapologetic. This movie is so unapologetic. It's not a shiny, glistening studio movie. It's not cliche. It's not typical at all. And sometimes that can turn a particular audience off, like my wife. So yeah, some of you might not like this movie at all. I loved it. I adored it. Trapped on a freaking island. Like, this movie, wow. I never expected a Suicide Squad movie to be this good. But you know what? It's James Gunn. And yeah, he earned it. This might be my favorite James Gunn movie, for sure. So anyway, let me know in the comments your thoughts on the Suicide Squad 2021. Really curious to see what you guys think of this one. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flex, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays we do Free for Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on all my socials. Support me on Patreon. Buy me a coffee. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.